Good, buddy. You?
Very well. Good Monday. Ready, fresh. Yeah, good start to the week. Let's
Monday
go
morning. Ready for the traffic. Ready for the traffic. It's crazy this morning. Traffic's crazy. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about this morning?
Land tax. I think we what is it? How much is it? When do you pay it? When don't you pay it? I think yeah, tax. So
cool. I've got music playing. I've got music playing on Facebook, buddy.
Yeah, that was just our intro. It's off now.
Oh, right. DJ. So
yeah, DJ
let's talk about land tax, buddy. I think it's a lot of investors talk about it. A lot of first home buyers don't know about it. A lot of people in New South Wales are not exposed to it, but the people that are have been absolutely punished in the last probably 12 to 24 to 36 months, huh?
Yeah. Well, put it this way, land tax is land, and we do see it a lot in the commercial arena as well now, especially when big parcels of land, well, basically the values have gone up in property dramatically over the last few years. So tell us, what is land tax? How often is it payable? And then I can go through some of the ratios. So what's land tax and when's it payable? And who's it payable for?
It's payable annually if you own a certain amount, over a certain amount of property. So to give you an idea, if you're an investor, the government lets you own so let's just talk single person for the moment. If you're a person and an investor, the government lets you own $600,000 worth of land value before they want to charge you a tax. So I'll give you an example. A house in Narrowena for 1.2, 1.3. I'm living at home. I buy a house. Mum and dad help me out. And I buy a house, generally a house in Narrowena. The land value, so land value is different. The value of general land value is what they use for tax assessment. It's different to the value of if I just sold the house on the block of land. So what our friends at government do is they say, what's your VGA? Your VGA is your value of general assessment. The VGA for this house in Narrowena is $1 million.
So you can't just get a real estate agent to write a letter saying it's only worth $500,000.
You can't.
So this is a value general.
VGA, value of general assessment. And then what happens is over that, once they realize that you're over that 600 odd K mark, I think it's 6 or 630 or something this year, the assessment value. Once you're over that, they want you to pay tax on that. They want you to pay tax on that. Every year they want you to pay tax on that. So to give you an idea, is for every 100 grand, it's about, I believe it sits at about 1.4%. So
1.6.
1.6. So 30
premium threshold of 3.846.
64. So you have to find $6,400 per year for the government. If you own a house as an investment, 6,400. So if you've got that house rented for $700-800 a week and you're paying your mortgage back, you've actually got to come up with some serious money, guys, to pay land tax because you're an investor. Now, if it's a unit, it's different. How does that work, Mr. Bergio?
Yeah, so that's where we're coming up with, we're seeing some investors change up their investment strategy. And it's because of land tax, a lot of the bills, like some properties around here basically have doubled. So that $6,000 a year can almost be, if it's almost at the moment, you're sort of lucky to have it positively geared or not too negative, but that extra $6,000 for a house, it just throws it well into the red, you could call it. So with a block of units, basically, if let's say that the same size block was the same size value as that house, $6,000 a year, if that block of units has 10 units on it, it's basically divided by 10. So it's a lot smaller portion. So you could almost have three. So if, let's just say that land value was 600,000 or 630,000 divided by 10, that unit may only be $63,000 towards that threshold. So you may be able to have 3 or 4 properties as an investment and still be under the threshold of $629,000. So
And
it's a big factor now.
it's massive. And you know where it is? I guess majority of people don't own multiple investment properties, so they're not really exposed to land tax. But if you're like an investor in a commercial area, and say like these typical Italian investors, they've got a really nice factory. That factory could attract a monster land tax bill, monster land tax bill every year. We've got landlords that are up for sometimes 200,000 or 300,000 a year, and they don't own a lot of commercial property. Like they own 1 or 2. They're fair sizes, but they're not. So that bill used to be close to zero, or zero 10, 20 years ago. But the government's really ratcheted up on these land tax fees. And the way they've done it is, when I went back to that VGA, the Value of General Assessment, they've been really clever with these VGA assessments. And they've actually, where the value of that VGA used to be half of the real value of the land, now the VGA value is really being pushed up. So there's guys in New South Wales in Value of General offices just looking all day, every day at these accuracy of these Value of General assessments, and they're pumping them up as much as they can be pumped up.
And can you fight it? Like, I know what's your sort of view? Like, you get your letter, because I know, like you said, there's some landlords that have these big blocks of property, but they don't generate much income because they haven't developed it. So they just don't agree with it. Like, can you fight it? Who can you fight it? Are you wasting your time? What do you reckon?
Yeah, look, there's lawyer firms and valuation firms that do it as a profession. I think you don't fight it for the sake of fighting it. You fight it if you think it's unreasonable. And look, that's why we're in a lucky country that there is plenty of reason out there. And I think if you can put up a good story, good factual information on your assessment of your property, they will put that value down. The problem with the land tax. So if anyone's just tuned in, we're talking about land tax for investors. So if you're an investor these days, every year you have to pay this land tax amount.
And it's the value based on before 31st of December. So that's the date. That's when the bill.
I think it's on or about the 25th or 31st, or 26th or 31st or 27th, or around there. So if you own a property at that date, you are paying land tax. That is the date they're going to they're going to assess you on land tax.
Yeah.
And you know what? This land tax story has actually made people owning investment properties just not possible anymore. People will sell their investment property because it is now impossible to keep the investment property because the amount of land tax they have to pay. It's really throwing things out of the water. I personally own an investment house. To give you an example, I pay $390. So if the house is rented for $750 a week, and you've got a mortgage of $1 million on a place, $1,000 a week has to go towards the mortgage. $390 has to to give you an idea on my place, $390 has to go towards the government. $390 a week I have to pay just for the benefit of owning that property to our friends at government. So it's a big money. Am I complaining? Yeah, probably. Am I happy? I realize taxes are necessary, but it's pretty incredible amount of money, like $400.
Well, Glenn Bowles just asked a question here, Mark. Do you want to confirm? So, guys, is it the value of the land or the land or land plus house in New South Wales?
Okay, so let's pedal back a little bit to answer that one. So what it is the government uses an assessment. They don't use. They have to assess somehow the value. So they can't send out a person to every single house to assess the value. So what they actually do is they say, look, we're only going to assess the land. Don't worry about if you've built the Colosseum on there. Don't worry if it's just a block of land. We're only going to assess the land, and we're actually going to appoint a body called the Valuer General. The Valuer General is going to estimate all values across New South Wales of all land. So to answer the question, it's the Valuer General's assessment of your block of land. He will do that for a unit block. The Valuer General will do that for a unit block. The Valuer General will do that for a house. The benefit of a unit block is you get to divide that number up between 8, 10, 12, however many units are on that block.
Which it's probably a pretty fair way. What do you reckon of the method? It's probably
the method's changed. Well, it's changed because it used to be stagnant. So they used to index that figure up. So every year they put it up a couple of percent, and they actually, believe it or not, the government undershot it. So people were paying a lot less land tax, and they're pretty happy with that. But I think it was about eight years ago or 10 years ago, they decided to really look at and review the values people were paying. So to give you an idea, if one had an investment property on a cliff top, or if one had an investment property 100 meters in from that cliff top, there were similar figures. Now the Valuer General's worked out that a cliff top is probably going to be worth 3 times more than a block of land 100 meters in. So they're starting to charge those sort of prices. And what's actually happened where people have got bitten is it's a rolling, they're doing a rolling 3-year average. So even though the property market pulled back, the VGA figures have continued to push forward.
I also saw it with Roger Street, Brookvale, Mark. Obviously it rezoned a few years ago, but there hadn't been a sale in there. So it hadn't for a site for quite some time. So originally they were around that sort of $1.5 million, and that's where everyone's block was, even though the rezone happened, and then a sale triggered that we did a few years back at 4.5. And then I remember speaking to a lady who has a block in there, and the chain reaction was her land tax. I think it tripled or quadrupled. And a lot of these owners, it sort of makes them think, well, I'm getting hit because it has this value. Yes, if I develop it, I'll get the value. But if I'm just sitting there, they feel a little bit I haven't done anything. It's not generating any more income. And now my expenses went from 10 grand to 40 grand a year just on that bill. But do you reckon it's a bit of a push to make people develop land as well?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So look, I think what you find is it's actually starting to activate a lot of dormant sites. People simply can't afford to sit on derelict houses that aren't rented. They can't sit on derelict commercial sites that are undeveloped. The benefit of this land tax is investors have pulled their finger out of their bum because they're getting slammed with this land tax every year. They're going, we're going to do something about this, or we're going to invest smarter. So let's sell this, let a developer develop it, and let's buy 10 units or 5 units or something. Do you know what I mean? So it's activated a lot of sites across Sydney because people simply can't keep up with the pressure of this rising land tax.
It's interesting. It's definitely made that. I think it's just like we spoke about stamp duty yesterday, land tax now, and even like I think more and more we sort of dive into it. There's just you really see where that savvy investor, where they're looking at the land tax difference between, instead of just saying buy something for $1 million, let's see what I'm buying for $1 million, lower the land tax, buy something new, maybe get depreciation, first home owners, stamp duty. There's a lot of extra costs which, if you're sort of not looking at, can really, really make the difference between a good investment and a bad investment. So I think it's really good to have all this top of mind and see what strategies work for you and what style of properties.
And there's that age-old question of, do you invest in a unit or do you invest in a house? How many times do we get asked that question? Do I buy a unit? Do I buy a house? Now, when you ask that question and you consider land tax, it really changes the power of that equation. The math is so much more different and in favor of a unit now, because of land tax. So I urge everyone that when they're doing their calculations on buying an investment property, if you dig below the surface and consider land tax, I think it would really switch your thinking. If you're thinking house, it could potentially switch your thinking very quickly over to a unit, because you've got the ability of, and it may sound a bit silly, but I'll use big figures because it amplifies the
Makes
the
you
problem.
sound smarter, Mark.
Talk big numbers.
Big numbers, big words.
Yeah. But you can own, to give you an idea, 2 houses as an investment property, 2 houses, the same amount, and say your land tax bill is going to be 40 grand a year, 30, 40 grand a year. And say those 2 houses are worth market value, $3 million. You can own about $5 or $6 million worth of units. So you may have 6 units or 10 units and pay the same amount of land tax. Yeah. So you can almost have double to triple the amount of property holdings, market value, that is, guys, not VGA, market value, but the VGA figures will be similar, which then means the land tax will be similar. So it's changed a lot of investment thinking towards strata title, where you're getting more, where you're chopping up the value of the block, as opposed to Torrens title, which is a house.
It was like those Sohos, Mark, that we did. It was like, what, 3.5 million sales, and they're like 60 or 80 grand per property. It was just like cheap for that sort of level.
So,
you know what I mean? And that was generating more than a house would generate. Like sometimes, it was huge difference.
Well, that with that example alone, that's a great example, because that developer, the advanced investor was purchasing 3.5 mil worth of property, but he had his land tax contribution was under the threshold. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So he owned 3.5 million. He owned effectively 5 units, paid 0 land tax because he was under the threshold. Now, if he took if he bought 2 houses, again, he'd have a bill of 30 to 40 grand a year. 30 to 40 grand a year over 10 years is $400,000, assuming it doesn't go up. It's going to go up, but it's $400,000. That's freezing the values. 400 grand like, even to pay in 10 years, as opposed to 0.
100%. Let's just say, and yes, you got strata, but strata's not 400 grand doesn't cost you 400 grand. So it's a really good, I think it needs to be spoken about more. I think a lot of that sort of old school thinking was land. There's definitely merits there, but especially as that, it's just, it's I don't think it's as black as white, or the mindset's definitely changing for a lot of investors out there that we're seeing. So I'm just seeing if there's any
questions from friends?
Any questions? Morning, Todd, Amal, Glenn, Jeff, Glenn, the other Glenn as well. Lisa Bruno, how are you? Alrighty.
Hey, Lee.
All
right. So land tax. It's a heavy topic. It's something that we've really got to be considering as investors.
Alrighty, guys. Full Monday night news is on 8 o'clock on Facebook. This will be podcast. Yep. That will be podcast. Everything's podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, you can watch the podcast anytime, guys, if you want to catch up, or if you want to forward this topic to friends, please. That helps us with getting more traction.
Yeah.
See you, bud.
See you guys. Bye.
See you guys. See you.
Oh, there you are, bud.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Yeah.